Without solid evidence, proving a crime is nearly impossible. No witnesses, no forensic proof. It's a dead-end case. At least that's how the system is supposed to work. But this case, it shattered all expectations. When a young mother suddenly disappeared, leaving behind no clues, no signs of a struggle, and no communication, the police were left scrambling. Had she run away? Was she in hiding? Or had something unthinkable happened? For a while, no one had answers. The case seemed destined to go cold until someone started talking. And that's when another so-called accident surfaced, turning this missing person case into something much, much darker. The story of Stacy Peterson is one of manipulation, power, deception, and a disturbing pattern of twisted relationships. Welcome to True Crimes by Dominic. If you're new here, this is where we break down real-life true crime cases that exposes the darkest corners of human nature. If you love true crime, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. It's free, and it helps bring more cases like this to light. And trust me, you'll want to hear every chilling detail of this case. To understand what happened to Stacy Peterson, we first need to talk about the man at the center of it all. Meet Drew Walter Peterson, the name that completely changed the course of this investigation. Born on January 5, 1954, in Bolingbrook, Illinois, Drew was raised in a strict military-style household. His father, a tough Marine, demanded obedience, discipline, and respect for authority. There were rules, and those rules weren't just guidelines. They were law. Drew attended Willowbrook High School, where he was a standout cross-country runner, and by all appearances, a normal, ambitious young man. That's also where he met Carol Brown, his high school sweetheart. The two were inseparable, went to prom together, and seemed like the perfect love story. In 1972, Drew graduated from high school and enlisted in the U.S. Army, spending a brief period in the military before transitioning into law enforcement. By 1974, he was married to Carol, and by 1977, he had started what seemed to be a highly successful career as a police officer in the Bolingbrook Police Department. Drew was charismatic, smart, and good at his job. In fact, just 2 years into the force, he was hand-selected to join the Metropolitan Area Narcotics Squad, a position reserved for only the best officers. And by 1979, he had already won the title of Police Officer of the Year. On paper, his career was flawless, respected, honored, and trusted. But behind closed doors, it was a different story. Despite being high school sweethearts, Drew and Carol's marriage lasted only 6 years. The reason? Infidelity. Carol discovered Drew had been cheating on her, and as we'll soon learn, this wasn't just a one-time thing. It was a pattern that would eventually leave one woman missing and another dead. 2 years after divorcing Carol, he found wife number 2, Victoria Vicky Connolly. They tied the knot in 1982, and for 10 years they ran a bar together in Romoville. But wait, wasn't Drew a cop? How did he go from catching criminals to pouring drinks? Well, Drew wasn't exactly a model officer. During his time in the narcotics squad, he was caught taking bribes and tampering with seized drugs, a major betrayal of his badge. As a result, he was demoted and eventually fired. That blow to his ego made him angrier, more controlling, and more dangerous behind closed doors. And Vicky saw that side of him up close. Years later, when Drew's name was all over the news, Vicky came forward with chilling claims. She revealed that Drew had threatened her life, saying he could make her death look like an accident. But that wasn't all. While still married to Vicky, Drew was cheating. Again. This time, it was with Kathleen Savio, a woman who would play a much bigger role in this story. Vicky found out about the affair in February 1992. That was the final straw. She left him, making her the second wife to escape his grasp. But Drew? He didn't waste time. A few months later, on May 3, 1992, he married his mistress, Kathleen Savio. Kathleen, also known as Kitty, was an accountant when she met Drew. After their wedding, they had 2 sons, Thomas and Christopher, born in 1993 and 1994. On the surface, they seemed like a happy family, living at 392 Pheasant Chase Drive in Bolingbrook. But behind closed doors, it was a nightmare. Drew's pattern of control, violence, and infidelity continued. He became abusive and manipulative, treating Kathleen as if she were his property. And, like his previous marriages, he couldn't stay faithful. By the early 2000s, Kathleen had had enough. She filed for divorce, and it was finalized in October 2003. However, their financial settlement was still unresolved, a key detail that would become very important later. Now here's where things take a disturbing turn. Between 2002 and 2004, police were called to the Peterson house at least 18 times. Let that sink in. 18 separate incidents. Some of those calls were about domestic violence. Others were because Drew wasn't following custody agreements, refusing to return the kids on time. But here's the terrifying part. Drew was a police officer himself, so he knew exactly how to play the system. Kathleen was scared, and she had every reason to be. She even got a protective order against Drew, but that didn't stop him. He was relentless. And sadly, she wasn't the only one suffering. Because while he was still legally married to Kathleen, he had already moved on to another woman. But this time, his new mistress was just 17 years old. Drew Peterson, a man nearly twice her age, began a relationship with Stacy Ann Kales, a teenager who was still finding her way in life. Let's pause for a moment. This man was a police officer. He was supposed to uphold the law, yet here he was preying on a young girl. But Drew, he didn't think the rules applied to him. Stacy was born on January 20th, 1984, to Anthony and Christy Kales in Downers Grove, Illinois. Her childhood was rough. She was one of 6 siblings, but tragedy followed the Kales family like a dark cloud. Before Stacy was even born, her older sister Jessica died in a house fire. The trauma shattered her parents, leading to constant fights that Stacy and her siblings had to endure. But the pain didn't stop there. Stacy also lost another sister, Lacey, to SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. At that point, Stacy and the rest of the kids were basically left to fend for themselves. Stacy's parents had neglected them, and sometime later, Christy, the mother and wife, was no longer in the picture. Stacy's dad, Anthony, filed for divorce and gained full custody of all of the kids. But he also struggled with alcoholism and couldn't properly take care of the children. Then one day, Stacy and her siblings found out that their mom, Christy, had gone missing, and she was just never seen again. Stacy and her siblings firmly believed that their mom was murdered by someone close to her, but there wasn't any development in her case. Life for Stacy was very hard. Living with dysfunctional parents and having seen death at such an early age, I'm sure Stacy was very traumatized and shaken up. But still, she and her siblings wanted to do better with their lives. Stacy attended Joliet Junior College, where she was studying to become a nurse, and she was working part-time at a hotel. Well, that was the very place where she met Drew. To Stacy, Drew was her savior. He was way older than her, but he was seemingly stable, and he was the safety and security she thought she needed in her life. Stacy's dad, Anthony, also knew of Drew, and even though Stacy was still a teenager at the time, he gave her permission to date Drew, who was almost 30 years older than her. This detail in itself is so awful, but I guess her dad likely thought that if she's dating a police officer, she'll be safe. Either that, or he couldn't have cared less. I'm not sure which one is more likely at this point. To make matters worse, Stacy got pregnant with Drew's child, and when this happened, Drew and Kathleen were still technically married. The boy was eventually named Anthony. But officially being granted a divorce from Kathleen, within a week, Stacy and Drew got married on October 18, 2003, and they lived together with all of Drew's kids at 6 Pheasant Chase Court in Bolingbrook, which was less than a mile from Kathleen and Drew's home. Everything seemed to be going great for a while. Drew had found a beautiful new wife, he had yet another child, and things seemed perfect. But all was not what it seemed. Kathleen's tragic death. A day before the fateful event, Drew was supposed to have a full day with Kathleen's kids, and he was now dropping them off. But when they reached the house and knocked, Kathleen didn't answer the door. Drew didn't think much of it and went back home to Stacy along with the kids. The next day, on March 1st, when Kathleen didn't answer the door again, Drew asked Kathleen's best friend and neighbor, Mary, to go check up on her. But when she did, she would find 40-year-old Kathleen in the bathroom, lifeless and cold. It was a scene that traumatized Mary for life. The investigators were called, and weirdly enough, they ruled her passing an accidental drowning, even though the bathtub was empty. It seems that they didn't even take the bruising on her body and the significant injury on the back of her head into consideration. If that wasn't weird enough, Drew sold Kathleen's house less than a month later and conveniently left out the fact that his ex-wife lost her life inside. Though admittedly, in some states you don't have to disclose this sort of thing. And Illinois is one of these states. When questioned by the police, Drew had an alibi, and it was none other than his fourth wife, Stacy. He was with her and the kids all day, so he couldn't have possibly had a hand in Kathleen's passing. So without any explanation, Kathleen was laid to rest, and her death was a haunting and mysterious event in the community. It was all labeled as some kind of strange accident, and that was basically the end of it. But 3 years later, something unexplained would happen yet again, and this time the person on this terrifying radar would be Stacy. Stacy goes missing in 2007. 23-year-old Stacy was near the end of her nursing degree, but one day in October, she went missing. It was her sister Cassandra who reported her missing on October 29th. See, Stacy had plans with Cassandra on October 28th to get together and help her paint her house. Stacy even visited Cassandra a day before, on October 27th, and left at around 11:30 p.m., but not before telling her family that she wanted a divorce from Drew. After being reported missing, the police got involved and there were huge searches for Stacy. She had children. She was happy about finally finishing her nursing degree, and she would never just up and leave her kids or family like that. Unless she was scared of something or someone. Everyone in the community looked for Stacy. Missing posters were stuck everywhere, and people went door to door to get any information. But Drew wasn't on the same page as everyone else. In fact, he claimed that Stacy called him from Bolingbrook's airport and said that she was leaving him and the kids for another man. Interestingly enough, Stacy's car, a 2002 Pontiac Grand Am, was found abandoned at that very airport. The only things missing from the house were a swimsuit, some cash, and Stacy's passport. Drew was convinced that Stacy was out dancing with another man. He was also not very cooperative during the investigation and searches. The investigators confiscated Drew's firearms, computers, and phones after a search warrant was issued, but they couldn't find anything. This was when Kathleen's death also came back into the spotlight. A lot of people thought that it was weird that one of Drew's wives died mysteriously, and now the other went missing without any explanation. It was just not sitting right with people. Well, Drew didn't help the case either, as he was doing interviews like a movie star left and right, maintaining his innocence and seemingly enjoying the time in the spotlight. But let's be real, if he didn't have anything to hide, and he supposedly didn't, then I don't guess this is too unusual for someone like Drew to enjoy a little bit of local fame. Well, before long, Drew became a prime suspect in Stacy's disappearance, as well as Kathleen's death. And to further cement this claim, Kathleen's body was exhumed and another autopsy was conducted. This time around, Kathleen's injuries didn't line up with an accident, and after 2 autopsies, one conducted by the detectives and one privately by the family's investigation team, the results were clear as day. Kathleen's cause of death was drowning, but it wasn't an accident. It soon became clear that a struggle took place beforehand, and the scene was staged to look like an accident. The bathtub was filled with water at one point, and then it slowly drained, which was why the tub was dry and empty when Mary discovered Kathleen. Infuriatingly, the coroner who initially ruled Kathleen's death an accident was buddy-buddy with Drew, and he convinced the jurors that Drew wasn't a violent man and that he wouldn't hurt anyone. This coroner deliberately ruled Kathleen's passing an accident, and this was allegedly done even when he had evidence to the contrary. It's scary to think of just how influential Drew was, even after he'd been fired from the police force. Soon after, a pastor at Stacy's church also came forward with a chilling revelation. He said that before she went missing, Stacy had confided in him about something. According to the pastor, Stacy said that Drew had murdered Kathleen and made it look like an accident and that she was scared for her life. Stacy also confided in the pastor that the night before Kathleen was found, Drew came home wearing black clothing, holding a duffel bag with women's clothing, which he proceeded to throw into the washing machine. He then turned to Stacy and warned her to tell the investigators exactly what he told her. This further deepened the case and proved that Drew had a motive for removing Stacy from the picture. Cassandra also came forward and said that Stacy was not happy in her marriage with Drew and that she wanted to get a divorce, but Drew wouldn't let her. Cassandra also said that Stacy foreshadowed that if anything happened to her, it would be Drew's doing, and now she was gone. Another person came forward with some chilling information, and it was none other than Drew's stepbrother, Thomas Morphy. He was actually in the hospital because he had tried to take his own life. Why? Well, because he was certain that he helped Drew dispose of Stacy's body. Things got intense, really quickly. See, Thomas told the police that Drew had called him over to help him move a big blue oil barrel into the car on the night Stacy went missing. Thomas didn't know what was in it, but it was warm to the touch. Some neighbors also came forward and said that they saw Drew dragging a large barrel out of the house and into his car at around 10 p.m. after Stacy disappeared, and all of this was caught on CCTV. The arrest and sentencing. So while Drew was out there quitting his job and doing interviews with TV and radio stations and news outlets, the investigators were building a case against him. As it turned out, Drew, the ex-police officer who thought that he was untouchable, was on the police's radar all along, and after going through multiple witness statements, new autopsy reports, and Drew's shady history with controlling and manipulating women, the detectives could finally arrest him, and that is exactly what they did. On May 7, 2009, 55-year-old Drew Peterson was finally arrested for Kathleen's murder, 5 years after her tragic death. But there was a problem. Neither Stacy nor Kathleen could testify against Drew, and everything the state had against him was hearsay. So this led to the passing of Drew's Law in Illinois. This law stated that hearsay statements from unavailable witnesses can be used in court against the defendant if the defendant had murdered the witness, the statements were reliable, and the interests of justice are best served by admitting the statements. So with that, the trial for Kathleen's murder began in 2012, 3 years after his arrest. So that was the prosecution's game plan. Led by State Attorney James Glasgow, the prosecution didn't know if this law was going to work, but that didn't mean that they weren't going to try. The prosecution brought in a bunch of witnesses, and they even talked about Stacy, whereas the defense was hell-bent on the stance that Drew didn't have a hand in any of his wife's passing or disappearance. There was no DNA evidence, no physical evidence, nothing to prove that Drew was involved in Kathleen's passing. Now everyone was waiting on pins and needles for the verdict. They knew that Drew had something to do with Kathleen's passing, but he was walking scot-free for years, and now the community was terrified that the same would happen again. After the trial ended, the jury deliberated and the verdict was out. Drew was found guilty of murdering Kathleen on September 6, 2012. He was sentenced to 38 years in prison and was incarcerated first at Menard Correctional Center, then at Federal Correctional Institution, Terre Haute. There, he was attacked by another inmate who had plans to rob him and sell his belongings online. Now, how this would have played out, I have no idea. But that's a whole other story. It's not instant karma, but it was karma nonetheless, knocking Drew down a couple of notches. Drew appealed his conviction countless times, but they were all upheld by the Illinois Supreme Court. You might think that it would be the end, but Drew being Drew, he couldn't keep his anger in check behind bars either. 3 years into his sentencing, a fellow inmate snitched on Drew, who approached him with an offer. See, Drew wanted James Glasgow, the prosecutor in his murder trial, dead, and if this doesn't basically prove his guilt in the disappearance of his ex-wife, I don't know what will. Seriously, this guy is on a roll of the worst kind. Well, the inmate went straight to the prosecutors and told them everything about Drew's heinous plans. He even wore a wire and recorded Drew's confession. Drew was charged with solicitation of murder and solicitation of murder for hire. He was found guilty in May 2016, and he racked up an additional 40 years in prison. Currently, he is incarcerated at the Indiana State Prison in Michigan City, Indiana, and is known as inmate number 279,193. Drew still maintains his innocence to this day and has done several prison interviews too, but I won't bore you with the details. What I will tell you, though, is that when Drew retired in 2007 as a sergeant, he was given a tax-free pension of $79,000 a year. Fortunately, Drew lost it after he was convicted of murder-for-hire charges in 2016, so luckily, Drew won't be living off a free salary behind bars. Nobody found Kathleen was given justice, but you need to remember that Drew was only convicted of her murder, not Stacy's, and this is what is so heartbreaking. No one knows where Stacy is, what happened to her, or where that questionable barrel is. Drew's former attorney, Joel Brodsky, who was more like Drew's publicist than a lawyer during Stacy's disappearance and Kathleen's latest investigation, appeared on 48 Hours and vaguely hinted that whatever happened to Stacy will be revealed after Drew passes away. He didn't elaborate further, but it did leave a bad taste in everyone's mouths. Joel also came forward in May 2022, expressing the need to expose information he had on Drew protected by attorney-client privilege. Stacy's sister, Cassandra, felt a weird mix of emotions at this. Regardless, she believes that this information could crack the code of Stacy's cold case, but Joel is under a continued gag order to not reveal any confidential information about or related to Drew. It also leads people to question whether Joel even has information on him or if he is just doing this for clout. But Cassandra is still hopeful that the information will help to solve her sister's case and maybe help to find her sister and give her a peaceful goodbye. But speaking of finding Stacy, Cassandra has been trying her hardest to find her sister ever since she disappeared. She is the only person who has been actively searching for Stacy since 2007, and she has used a lot of resources to try to find Stacy and bring her back home. She has made a Facebook page dedicated to the search for her sister and also set up a GoFundMe for the retrieval of Stacy's remains. As of recently, in April 2024, Cassandra believes that she has found Stacy's remains in a canal in Illinois. Cassandra's team used sonar technology to locate a body in a canal that was narrowed down after talking to many different witnesses. Cassandra has been keeping tabs on this mysterious body since 2009. As of recently, a video was shared on the Facebook page for Stacy, showing that an ROV recovered images of remains on the riverbed. After modification and image clearing, a skull, rib cage, and lower leg bones can be identified. Cassandra informed law enforcement of this discovery back in 2008, but the investigators basically ignored her and made no attempts to retrieve the remains. This left Cassandra with no choice but to make continuous efforts in trying to improve the retrieval methods of the remains underwater. She rented high-quality equipment from Alaska and even went to the investigators again, and this time the police did check the area. But they found nothing but a rock, and the rest of the area was cleared. This was enough to convince Cassandra that the investigators weren't going to do anything about what she had found, likely because they're all friends with Drew. This was why she ultimately started a GoFundMe page to help raise funds to get better and high-quality equipment and have divers go into the canal and retrieve whatever the ROV picked up. 17 years. 17 long years since Stacy Peterson vanished without a trace. And even though Drew Peterson is locked away, justice still feels incomplete. If Drew truly had a hand in Stacy's disappearance, then he must be held accountable. But without a body or rock-solid evidence, the law's hands are tied. No one feels the weight of this more than Stacy's sister, Cassandra. For years, Cassandra has been relentlessly searching for the truth. She believes Stacy's remains are still out there, hidden, waiting to be found. And all she wants, all she's ever wanted, is to bring her sister home. Because right now, Stacy is nowhere. No grave, no resting place, no closure, just a cold, dark unknown. If the remains Cassandra is searching for are ever found, they can finally be tested. And if it is Stacy, her family can finally say goodbye. But until then, the mystery lingers. And here's the truly disturbing part. Drew Peterson was a police officer, a man sworn to uphold the law, and yet he weaponized his badge, his power, and his authority to destroy the lives of those who trusted him most. What does that say about justice? About power? About the people we put our faith in? Now I need to hear from you. Do you believe Drew Peterson got away with the perfect crime? Or do you think justice will eventually catch up to him? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one of them, and if you found this case as twisted and shocking as I did, make sure to subscribe to True Crimes by Dominic. I upload new deep dive crime stories every 2 days, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Hit the like button, share this video with someone who loves true crime, and let's keep this conversation going. Because cases like Stacy's, they deserve to be remembered.